All right, this is another in the first read series, a series where I just read a poem by a poet I don't know or know very little about and just do a first reading for the sheer joy of it for poetry. I might come back and do it totally different later, but this is just a first reaction. So this is from Tupelo Quarterly. If you don't know it, you should. And it's Most of Us Early or Late by Gale Batchelder, who I've never heard of. Maybe I should have. Well, I'll see what Gale's poetry is like here, just briefly. I don't read these beforehand, so I just kind of pick these randomly. I just like the title. Something about the title jumped out at me, so that's why I picked it. Most of Us Early or Late. I don't know if it relates to the poem or not, but if I look at the poem, I always start with the form. This one's set in two different columns. Say this is true, that is true. It looks like it's going to be a poem where you can decide how you read, up and down or across. I tend to like poems like that. I kind of think they're fun to write when you're doing that kind of thing. Sometimes it can be confusing to a reader, so we'll kind of see. They kind of mirror each other in a way here. The indents are all similar, and how it's done, and it's almost like a reverse image of each other, which is sometimes not something people play around with when they're doing the column thing. So kind of like that kind of reversed image. It doesn't look like a traditional form, so I'm not even going to bother with like meter or anything with this. I'll just listen to what I hear in it and go from there and assume it's an open form or what people call free verse. So let's just read. Say this is true or that is true. Okay, so looks like different columns. So I don't know how to read it up or down. This is kind of playing with what it is we're doing as readers. Say this is true, or maybe it's try and err, a mess of confession to know it. You can know anything. The what if, what for, one shallow breath, eyelash irritating its own eye. Every word a smog, swift and swallow at wing, your foot raised and. Well, that last line looks like we're supposed to read it across because of the and. So maybe I should have just read it across all the way through. But it does kind of flow on its own with to know it. You can know anything, the what if, the what for. So it can be read up and down. I don't know that it's this one doesn't feel like a narrative poem, so I'm not going to really try to go with a beginning, middle, end. It doesn't feel like a story poem. It feels more like a poem where we're jumping around from idea to idea, so kind of paratactically organized. So I'll kind of go there. Parataxis, of course, is jumping from one idea to another without much connection. So I say this is true or that is true, or maybe it's try and err. Warm socks on a cold floor. I'd like that warm socks on a cold, maybe it's try and err. That's a kind of fun image, a mess of confession, awkwardness, and supplication. Is this the confession, awkwardness, and supplication? To know it, you have to believe you can know anything. A name and a place. That actually I think works better. This little section right here definitely works better when you read it across the page in a traditional reading fashion. You have to believe you can know anything, a name, a place, the what if, what for, a grip of hands. Even reading across, though, it doesn't perfectly align in a kind of logical narrative sense. I don't know that poems need to do that. It's not actually what I feel like poems usually do for us, is give us some kind of logical explanation. So I don't need to bother too much with it. One shallow breath, one raspy. Yeah, it's definitely playing off of each other here. Eyelash irritating its own eye, blank. This is kind of mirroring what's happening in the different columns. I think just reading through it this way, it feels like the most natural way is just to read it left to right all the way across and see it as a kind of mirrored image of what's happening in the other side. That kind of works better than reading it down on its own. But once I get done reading it this way, I'll go back and read it across. Every word a smog and pink dust erasure. Swift and swallowed wing, true blue of larkspur. So we have birds in both sides of this. Your foot raised and step down each step. It's this kind of mirroring of the images and kind of complicating of what's happening on one side of the poem and the other side. Well, let's read this second column on its own. Or that is true, warm socks on a cold floor, awkwardness and supplication. You have to believe a name, a place, grip of hands. I really like that way those lines from awkwardness to hands work on their own as a as a poem, but I also liked how they worked inside of the poem in general. Grip of hands, one raspy, blink and dust erasure, true blue of larkspur, set down each step. So it's kind of fun the way that this mirroring works, because so this last line of column 1, your foot raised and, doesn't seem to work without column 2. The very first line of column 2, or that is true, doesn't seem to work without the first line of 1. So it's this weird kind of double mirroring in the form of this poem, which I love form play, so that you already have me with that. How does this relate to the title? Most of it's early or late. I don't know what early or late is, this kind of double column here. And I say this is true or that is true. I'm not sure what the this or the that is, what the referent for those pronouns is. So I'm just going to go with this. It could just be, instead of a pronoun, a demonstrative pointing to say this column is true or that column is true, like it's pointing to them. So I'm not even sure how to read that. Maybe it's try and err, like maybe it is trying out what works and see what works. Mess, a confession. The whole thing feels like that. Is a little bit of a mess and infection. It's awkwardness and supplication. It's the complexity of kind of human life working itself out on the page with us trying to figure out how to read it and how to interpret it. The what if, you have to believe you can know anything. I think that's how we have to feel with the poem. We have to feel like we can know anything. Grip of hands, one shallow breath, one raspy, eyelash irritating, blankets. Like, how do we look at, how do we read this? And is there something we're supposed to pull out of this? And there's lots of different images, from the very human images of warm socks and a cold floor, but also of the nature images, the swift, the swallow, the larkspur at the end. And that's kind of your foot raised and a step down. Each one of these steps across the line feels like a little bit of a step down into something. I'm not really sure. So in the end, the content of this, I don't know that I really touched on it that much. I mean, it feels like it is about knowing, but I'm not actually that concerned about it, because the form is really fun to play around. I kind of think this would be a fun one to see in a bigger series, to see how that form works in the context of other poems and what that says in general. So interesting. Gale Batchelder, I hope I'm saying your last name correctly. Very interesting. I'd like to see more of this poet.